We're going to start over and allow Julie to take the roll again.
And this is for the approval of the agenda. All right, so Mr. DeYoung is excused. Mr. Huizenga?
Present.
Ms. Pugh Walters? Yeah. And Teresa Weatherall Neal, chairperson.
Present. Thank you. Kate, let us know if you need us to repeat anything, okay? I would like to ask for any public comments at this time. Seeing there are none, we will move forward to the next agenda item, which is any business items that we may have. We don't have anything here, and so we would like to move forward to our discussion item, and that is the Promise Zone Authority for our next steps.
All right, so I'm going to go over the Gantt chart that's in your packet, which starts on page 5 to kind of talk through just an overview of kind of what happens next, including approval development plan and then thereafter and what's being proposed. So, we're in the process of approving the development plan. We have submitted a draft to the Treasury. I did get confirmation that we will be hearing back by the end of this week in time for the full board meeting on Monday from the Treasury. So they are reviewing it now. From that point, the Treasury, assuming the board approves on Monday of the development plan, it'll be submitted to the Treasury for final approval, and they would have 60 days from that date to approve it. If they don't act at all on it, it's automatically approved. They could submit comments back for revisions, which we would have to then approve again, and then resubmit. And so given that they're already reviewing, and we had the state's representative review it already several times and provide comments, so I don't see that we'll have any issues there. As part of, so on Monday, if the board approves the development plan, this will be announced. So currently, there's a plan to have a press conference immediately following the Promise Zone board meeting to provide the press an opportunity to hear from some key speakers. And right now we have Teresa Weatherall Neal, the mayor, and Dr. Pink from GRCC tagged as the speaker lineup. And so we needed to have some messaging and something ready for that point so that when it's announced, you can imagine being a school administrator, a student, a parent, and you have questions. So what do we provide at that point? So Canary saw that this is something that needed to be addressed, and we're kind of taking that under as part of our work, and we brought in and paid for Well Design as a subcontractor to help organize this work as well, recognizing that we needed the expertise in the room. And I do have some preliminary things to show you that I'm going to get into after we go through the spreadsheet, and I'm going to ask the Well Design representative to come up and talk to you for a minute. But the next point that we really had to start fairly quickly is the scholarship administration. So the chair reached out to GRCC to ask whether they would be willing to administer the scholarship, knowing that we had a few months to figure this out to be ready for the class of 2020, and they had the process already established, and seeing this as a scholarship for GRCC, it made a lot of sense. GRCC has been very gracious with their time and helping figure this out. We've been working with them over the last month, and we worked through break and working through all the various things that has to be figured out in order to administer the scholarship and make it the easiest as possible, make it kind of minimally, remove all the barriers for students to access the scholarship. And so we've done a lot of work in identifying that, and that will continue. And so that's where kind of different steps. So, how do we determine student eligibility? How do we work? So there will be some conversation between the eligible schools and GRCC and us to determine what that process is. What's the role of the schools in providing information, and those kind of things. How do we identify which of the graduates are eligible, and how do we communicate with them? There's going to be some kind of administrator on their end. So, and I'll be forwarding this committee a job description that was developed. So, what's the process for appeals? And that's an important part of this, is that this board or the authority board has the option to hear appeals. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And then the process for scholarship recipient tracking. So those are the kind of things we're working through with GRCC. If everything goes well, the plan is to bring for GRCC to present a contract for services to this executive committee first, and then to the full, if it's approved, to move forward to the full board in February. And so that's kind of the current schedule. So you might notice that there is no meeting in February. I think we will have to establish both the executive committee and a full board meeting in February to move this work along. All right. So going into kind of so when we get in development plan, you'll see some other services that are being proposed, and in order to provide a process to select the appropriate firms for marketing, branding, and legal services, we are proposing an RFP process that Canary Consulting will assist in drafting the RFP and present it to this committee first, then to the full board for approval to release. So this is kind of the timeline we established for those things. So as you can see, it would move pretty fast under our timeline, hopefully by March, having someone selected. So this executive committee taking the lead and kind of reviewing and making a recommendation to the full board for those services. And so that's the process that we have set up. But that is our hope, that we can meet these timelines, because there's need for these services. Like I said, right now, Canary Consulting is paying a subcontractor for marketing and messaging because we just need it now. But long term, the board has to select who their marketing partner and legal services. GRPS has graciously offered Sharon, and she's been great in this process. But long term, this authority board will need to have its own kind of legal representation and counsel. So marketing, branding, and I'm gonna kind of go through these fairly quickly. The marketing, branding, essentially this, we will ensure that there aren't any gaps. That Canary Consulting, we're committed to making sure this goes well. It's important to us. But at what point the board establishes its marketing company, its firm, that firm will follow its process that it proposes, that it lays out in its proposal to lay out that work. So that's kind of just recognizing that happens on what timeline. It could be quicker, could be longer, I suppose. But that's certainly to be ready for the beginning of the next school year, so that we have a full year of messaging strategy laid out before it starts. So fundraising. So this. And we'll get into it a little bit more in the development plan, but there's definitely a need. So we have identified $3 million right now to meet the financial obligations for the Promise Zone Authority, and so there's the question of, so if I'm a donor, where do I write a check to? And so in our experience, donors are not that excited about writing a check to a governmental authority. So again, the chair reached out to GRCC and asked if the GRCC Foundation would be willing to administer the philanthropic funds. So they would be the entity to which a donor to resource a development plan would write a check. And so working with them to set up they have the processes in place, but there needs to be some agreement between the authority board and the foundation for administration of those funds. So they've committed on their legal counsel to draft an MOU or an agreement of some sort. They're determining what that needs to look like, and present it back to this committee first, and then to the full board again for approval on that. Yes. Yes, so that we need to work out the process for that, but yes, we did talk about that, and the GRCC person behind me just told me yes to. But yes, there will be a way for us to segment those funds out and ensure that they're being expended to the intent of the donor and the authority board.
Kate, this is Teresa. The person in the room is Lisa Freiberger from GRCC.
So beyond that, the authority board and this committee, will own the process for identifying and cultivating donor prospects to meet the fundraising goal. And so that's Canary Consulting will be assisting in identifying those donors, developing strategy for cultivation, and ultimately, if there's a formal proposal required, we would complete that as part of our contract. And so we'll walk this board and the board and this committee kind of through that process to meet our fundraising goal. So a big part of what we've had conversations with board members individually and the full board together, student supports was a major consideration that the board wanted to have as part of this work. So when we did have our initial conversations with GRCC, we were asking the questions of, so what could we put in place for a class of 2020 to what could we reasonably do to ensure the success of those students, and then what happens long term. So there's a couple things that we've identified. So the expansion of FAFSA events to assist students in completing that form, that was something that GRCC committed to, and we're working through to get additional dates set for that so that we can promote that through our marketing channels, as well as expansion of GRCC's Fast Track program, which is a kind of a short intensive program for students that score in a certain range on their entry exams for ELA and math. So they could get some tutoring and some online resources and then retake the exam. And then if they score above a threshold, then they won't have to take remedial courses. And that will ensure that the scholarship funds that are being used are going toward credit accumulation toward a degree, and less so on the remediation needs to get up to the college level of for those subjects. But long term, there's certainly a desire among the board to develop out a more broader framework of how students are supported. And for that, again, we're talking a citywide initiative. I think there's going to be several funders. The Promise Zone, I think, is going to lead this work, but it shouldn't be the only funder of this work if we kind of frame this correctly, to where you're one funder and a vision leader in this area, but several funders are coming along and rethinking how we're using existing funds that are being expended on within these systems that we're trying to influence. So, we're recommending that there be some open process to find the right consulting partner for that work. There are some national firms that have done great work in other communities that we could look to, and so this would be above and beyond the $3 million. So what's that cost? So it kind of depends on what scope of work we develop. But I think it's going to be important long term for there to be a broader framework that's identified for, because that's really the mechanism through which the board would accomplish its goals. So we know the scholarship is great, and it does move the needle, but we've seen in other communities it doesn't move it enough to where you can actually measure a significant impact. And so those support structures are going to be necessary to do that. And so part of that too would be the evaluation framework for those as well, would be in that. So you see that's being proposed later in July and August to start considering those things, because we have to get the administration stuff set and this organization up and going and ready for the class of 2020 scholarship. And then there's more time to consider the broader framework. And that will likely be, so even if it starts in September, October, that'll probably be a pretty long, maybe year, it could be more, depending on what the scope of work is and what we want to do, to figure out what that framework is. So.
Josh, I think it's important that we speak with each superintendent to find out where they feel their gaps are,
Yep.
right? So when we look at student support services, it comes across the spectrum for all districts. I'm labeling them as districts for
Yep.
lack of a better word, but all districts as well as with community college, so we can find out from their end where they believe gaps are,
Yep.
right? So I think, and I think there's one other component, and that is the student voice. So I think there's three pieces to this.
Yep.
Before we start with student support services. We obviously can look at dollars, internally with each individual superintendent, but I think it's important that we figure that piece out and give each superintendent a voice.
Absolutely. And I think, consideration of the existing system and a gap analysis and mapping of what already exists and how
That's
the
right.
existing mechanisms are working should be a critical part of this process, which takes time, which is why it could take a year or more to kind of get to the final picture. So that is kind of the next steps. That's a broad overview, and I kind of took it through the September board meeting because I think that's kind of a critical point where the class of 2020 will have started, and then the next class will have started. The graduating class will have started school. So I think that's a kind of a critical point to kind of reevaluate where we're at. So that's where I took it. So at this time, is there any questions about?
Yes,
Yeah.
good. Thank you, Josh.
Josh, can you just give me a clarification what FSA stands for?
So you're gonna ask me what the acronym stands for.
Yeah.
It is the Financial.
It's for the
Federal application for financial student aid. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yep. So you, we will, and you'll see that again. So that's good that we asked that question. So that is you're required to complete that form to access federal and state need-based aid. So that's a critical component. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? And as part of the draft, we'll put together a process to show where we'll go through and talk to each individual superintendent and or principal, whichever, to give them a voice to find out what the needs are.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Josh.
So I want to show you, so part of this is we had to develop some branding for this initial launch to be able to put this out there. And so I'm going to show you some initial logos and a web page that's being worked on. And to walk through that, I'd like to bring up Josh Leffingwell with Well Design, him and his team have been working on these items. And just kind of overview what they developed, kind of get some of your feedback, but also talk about what's going to be presented on Monday to the full board because it's still in development. But
Hi, all. I'm Josh Leffingwell,
talking to the mic.
partner at Well Design Studio. We're a community-based studio that does a lot of work with municipalities and specifically has a focus around education and has done work with GRPS and other school districts in the area. Josh brought us to the table in part because we have a bit of a brief timeline and wanted to make sure that we were able to put something together that gets us all off on the right foot. So what you see here is primarily a way for us to launch, and from here, once this is initially launched and we have the ability to begin messaging, you'll see in that plan that Josh just presented that ultimately another firm or an RFP will go out or should be developed that will begin to take this work and kind of run with it, or go back to the table and begin gathering real input from the community to help understand what the overall messaging and design should be, larger than just the short time frame that we had to kind of put this together. That said, we wanted to make sure that we presented you all and presented the community with a brand and a website and a message that they would feel clear. They would understand what is going on, what's happening, why this is happening, and find out whether or not they're eligible and how they can begin getting the support that they need in order to start attending GRCC. So we have in mind an initial brand, an initial messaging that we'll be developing. What you see here is a first crack at the brand. So the Grand Rapids Province Zone on your, because the one with the cap on it, the main logo, is the initial brand mark that we'll be running with, at least for the initial brand launch. And then the simplified is mostly because when it gets small, the graduation cap gets a little bit too small, so it starts to be hard to read. So we have it also without the cap. But this is the logo that we're going to be running with. And then we've expanded the brand. If you either flip over the page or scroll down, you'll see it's mostly, don't look so much at the Pinky Promise part of it, but you'll see the color palette, and then you'll see the typography and the brand elements. So we'll begin using iconography to help tell the story as well, and then using the typography that you see there. I think the more important part, I don't know how interesting the branding portion of it is to you all. Mostly what we're hoping that we're able to do is help folks understand that this is a scholarship for students, and that they're eligible. They can find out that they're eligible for it relatively quickly. And so we've helped develop also alongside this an initial first take at the website. It will expand, and a lot of this is just sort of like we started on this a couple days ago, and so we're still developing like the actual content and what it will say, and we're working with GRPS and GRCC to source like actual photography instead of just the stock photography. But this is essentially when folks go to the website, they'll get the initial messaging telling them about what's going on, what the overall program is, what schools are a part of the program, and then this will also, in that section, will lay out that you must be a resident of Grand Rapids and go to a Grand Rapids school starting in 10th grade in that section. And then we'll have the frequently asked questions so that families can quickly understand what it is that this program is and have some of their answers taken relatively quickly, and then begin going for so that the next part will be the form, so that they can fill out a form to ask any questions that they might have beyond, so that we can begin fielding some of these requests and helping folks understand the system. Also by getting their emails, we'll be able to continue to talk to them in the future and help them understand in the future what the program is. And as either parents or students or community members in general fill out these forms, we'll be able to continue to keep them informed about the program and help them understand it's obviously a big tool for students and parents, but also community members as well, that this is an impact for the broader community. So helping everybody kind of understand what this program is and what it means to the community.
Awesome. So I have a question. Will the website be interactive? So for parents and community members, they will.
Yeah, so the goal is with the website, and this is something that I think we're having something so that Josh had mentioned the January 13th meeting next Monday, and that after that meeting, there's going to be somewhat of an announcement that if the plan is approved, that this will be happening, and we expect that parents will begin trying to find out more information. And so this initial website is going to be a little bit bare bones, and it's just mostly supposed to get the message out there and help folks understand if they have any quick questions. In the long term, though, we're at least until we pass this off to either the next marketing firm that is chosen through that RFP process, or if we continue to working on it, we're going to begin working with adding those events like those FAFSA
Nice.
Events. So helping folks understand that this is sort of the go-to place for anything that you need to know about this program. So it will be interactive. There will be the possibility to do kind of anything. It just really depends on, and this is why we think through that RFP process, it's important to bring in a firm that will do a little bit of research, to talk to parents, talk to students, to find out what it is they want in the website, so that when these programs become available, these events become available, and the scholarship becomes available, the community feels like this is actually a resource for me, not just to know whether or not I get the scholarship, but know about events that are happening that are specifically focused around the scholarship. If I'm running into trouble as a student who is receiving the scholarship, where can I turn for resources as a student who has the scholarship? So it will be built out much bigger than this, but for that initial launch on the 13th, it'll be a little bit more of this bare
That's
bones.
understandable.
Yeah.
Will there be any opportunity for then the link to be provided to the local schools so that they can have a link directly from their own websites?
100%, yeah. And so we're actually, we bought the URLs GR Promise Zone and Grand Rapids Promise Zone, so that we're able to use those as like the main landing pages for this website. Right now, what you're seeing is just on a development site, so it's not live just yet. It'll go live on the 13th. But
Talk a little about the information is being developed that will be sent to the eligible schools too, that has more than just that, but some information that they can use to share through their networks about the Promise Zone. So.
Yeah, so we were brought in not just to do the branding and the website itself. We're also developing a suite of talking points and a suite of materials that that schools will be able to use as resources as well. So these will include initial social media assets, so that once this goes live, and once our goal is to make this kind of a celebration, that this is a big deal. It's a big day for Grand Rapids, but it's also an opportunity for us to begin educating on not just the scholarship in and of itself, but to the values of higher education and all of those things, and the importance of those things. So we'll develop initial assets that you'll be able to take and use. You'll get essentially just like a Google Drive folder that will have the logo. It'll have some social media assets. It will have talking points in it. It'll have a good overview of frequently asked questions, so that you'd be able to disseminate those to your to individuals in your schools, so that they can feel confident talking about it, and also feel like they are very much a part of this program. The more that we have ownership inside the schools itself, the better it will be to disseminate the information. Not that many people know about the Grand Rapids Promise Zone, partially because we haven't announced it, but but everybody knows about your schools, and the more that the schools, which are a trusted body, are kind of disseminating the information, the more that parents and families will trust that this, what might seem too good to be true, is actually something that's happening for them.
It makes me think a little bit about what the board can do to support the communication and dissemination of that. And one of the things that comes to my mind is how important it's going to be for the right individuals to meet with the key contacts at the local high schools.
I just made that note as well. Good.
Sure. I mean, that's really going to be important, that they have an opportunity to do a quick Q&A just face to face.
Yep.
That's
So that is, so I gave a broad overview. Next steps. So as soon as that's approved and this happens, I was planning on drafting a communication that would come from the chair to those, and we have to do some. And maybe we can think now. I was thinking, do we bring everybody together and talk to them together in one room, or do we go one-on-one and talk with them individually, or both? And so that's kind of what I was thinking through.
I think because of the time crunch, right now, Josh,
Yep.
we do everyone together, and we do like maybe 3 sessions, right?
Yeah, to give them options, yeah.
Right, so allow them to choose. But getting counselors in is a part of that. But I also think superintendents and principals, people that they report up, because people get busy and they may go off and do something else. I think
Yep.
that's important. And I also think the business community, at some point, we need to connect with the business community, Talent 2025, and there may be others, so they know that this is available.
So I have a partner session or several partner sessions too.
Sure. And then one last thing, and that is, I would like to know where CC's IT person is in this design, because I think it's important that we have the voice of Pink in the room.
Their communications.
And their design.
Their communications team has
Their IT.
been a part of this.
Good deal.
And also, we're meeting on Friday too.
Awesome.
For them to review kind of the strategy too. So them and the city has been involved too.
I think there's great synergy in getting groups of people together for something like this, as opposed to what we did initially when we had folks like you guys came around and met with individually board members. That's a great option, but there is such a great synergy with people talking with each other and hearing each other. I and our counselors and others, superintendents, we all know each other. We hang out together. We get together for various professional activities. They already have great relationships, so I think that's really neat.
And they see us speaking with one voice.
Yep.
Right? And in the world of student competition, everyone's trying to compete for students. I think that people in this community need to understand this initiative is about all of our children.
Yep.
Right? And so getting people together, giving them options, they will see that this is really the new way of doing business. Right? One for all and all for one.
One of the things that you'll also see, and you'll be presented at the January 13th meeting, will be a draft marketing plan, at least an initial marketing plan. Obviously, whoever picks up and runs with this will create the more long-term marketing plan, but ultimately we need to start talking to folks before they graduate.
That's
And we need to make sure that families are informed. People have already made college decisions and are continuing to make college decisions kind of as we speak. So how do we make sure that those families initially feel like they have a part and a voice in this, and understand the process? So one of the things that we'll be presenting, or you'll be at least given, is the initial marketing plan that will help kind of roll out what this initial program looks like. And a lot of that will include what you all are talking about right now, making sure that we're talking with a lot of different folks, because this doesn't, it's realtors. How do we help realtors understand as they bring folks to our community that this is a great new opportunity for them? And how do we there's a lot of folks that need to be informed on this. And luckily we've had already a ton of great support from Dr. Pink and his staff, and from the city itself, and I know the mayor, this is a major initiative for her as well. So making sure that we have a ton of channels. We have some of the loudest channels. So how do we make sure that everybody gets this positive message?
That's great. Awesome. Right? Good job.
Thank you.
Any other questions for me?
Thank you. It's exciting.
Thank you.
Exciting work. Kate, do you have any questions or comments?
No, I don't. I was just trying to work around my current issues.
You're fine.
We're fine.
I can hear you.
Okay, good deal.
I have no comments. I love the logo. I like the plan. I don't know if anybody asked a question earlier when I couldn't hear as well about paying for this. And since we don't have an infusion of cash right now, I assume that's going to come from GRPS.
Yeah, yes, Kate, currently we are using GRPS for this.
Yep.
Larry Oberst is also in the room. Would you like for him to come to the mic, Kate?
But I do want to clarify that as part of Canari's contract, we're picking up the bill for the work that you just saw, and until the board selects its long-term marketing partner. So it's part of that, and we will see some of those things when we go through the development plan too on the financial projections. So.
And Kate, anything that is not covered, we will keep records so we know exactly what we're doing. And so once we have our fundraiser and begin to raise the dollars, we will know exactly where everything should go.
Got it. Thank you.
So we're going to move to the next agenda item.
Yep. So at the last board meeting, we went through an exercise to consider the mission and vision statements and goals of the Promise Zone Authority, and we got a lot of great feedback from the board. And we went back and revised those three things based on board feedback, and wanted to present them again to this executive committee for comment and approval to forward on to the full board for approval. They're up in front of you and in your packet are the mission statements. So I'll just go ahead and read the mission statement in these out loud. And so the mission of the Grand Rapids Promise Zone Authority is to support the young people of our city as they pursue their aspirations after high school graduation by removing financial, societal, and systemic barriers. Any comments or questions about that one before I move on?
No issues
Yep.
here.
For the vision statement, the Grand Rapids Promise Zone Authority envisions a community in which all students, regardless of financial resources or background, have equal opportunity to acquire the college degree or post-secondary credentials necessary to reach their career and life aspirations. In this context, Grand Rapids will be an equitable community only when neither socioeconomic background nor, I think there's nor race, ethnicity of its residents are determinants of their educational outcomes, college success, income, or level of employment. So that one was revised slightly because there was a desire of the board to define what we meant by equitable access to education. So that's kind of the expansion of that.
Yes, I have a comment on that.
Yes.
Josh, I have no problem with the first part of the vision statement, because I certainly believe that there should be an equal opportunity access.
Yep.
But I made a comment just now to Teresa. If John Helmholt and I were in a foot race
Yep.
and it's a 10K, John would, we'd both be allowed to enter, right?
Right.
Equal access.
Yep.
But to have equal outcomes, we'd have to put leg weights on John.
So, yep. So I definitely get that. So the vision statement and how we use them is they're aspirational. They're very aspirational in some cases, and some might argue, could we ever get there? But it kind of sets our vision. So we could revise it, but it's kind of that the inequity in that your background currently is a predictor of those things, and it's addressing that system that has that, to provide more to make that more equitable. Now, will it ever be that? I hope so. So that's kind of the thought around it too. So initially we presented, the first part was what was presented to the board last time, and there was this thought of, do we define it? So if you want to go and kind of stick with the first part of it as the aspiration, we could, and this what this committee wants to do, we can do that, yeah.
I could be more excited about removing constraints.
Yep. Okay. Noted. And sometimes that happens where you see it one way, you have comments, but when you see it the other way, you're like, actually, I liked it the first way. So.
JC, where did you direct me to where constraints is relevant?
Oh.
JC, I'm trying to remember the thing, there's an example that's been used to help us understand the differences in equity and access, and I understand what you're saying, but we're talking about people that we all know that don't get a chance from the get-go because of where they came from. And what we're saying is that, to the best of our ability, we want to eliminate money as one of those limits to starting in the right place. And, we can't eliminate people's racism, and we can't eliminate people's sexism, but what we can do is help eliminate the financial barrier. So I think it's important to keep a strong statement on equity in there.
I agree, But it seems like it should be equity of opportunity, not equity of outcome, because we can't control outcome.
Actually, that makes sense to me.
Yep.
That's intuitive to me.
Okay.
Do we have any reason at all, and I'm not, by asking the question, I'm not suggesting it needs to be included. I just know how sensitive folks are to multiple areas of diversity within the community, including those that are abled or disabled, however we want to phrase that. And is there any concern on our part that there is a need in a vision statement to ensure our acknowledgement of the fact that equity and of access can be limited by mobility, can be limited by, in some cases, ability?
Broader than
It may not be a
socioeconomic
relevant
and
thing
race.
for this, because I understand what's underlying what we're doing. I just am wondering about that, to what extent all kids will have equal access to these opportunities, and that would not be a determining factor or deterrent.
Yep.
That's right. I would like to have Sharon Pitts take a look at this just to, I'm sorry, Kate, I'm asking for Sharon Pitts to take a look at this just to make sure we are inclusive of the entire community. We want to do that because it really is for everyone.
Sure.
And so once we get to this point, even before we take it to the full committee, let's have Sharon Pitts just read the language to make sure.
So what we'll do, so I'm
that
gonna,
will
yeah, I am gonna go over the goals too, but what we'll do is kind of table the approval and have this committee review again. Now, a version of this is in the development plan, but that's not a barrier. That's
We're tweaking.
Yeah, so that's it. It'll be somewhat cemented in the development plan, but it's not we're not committing to a bunch of stuff in that. So, so going on to the goals. So the three goals that we tweaked these, actually 1 and 3, after last meeting was provide, goal number 1, provide equitable access to college and career training. Goal number 2, which the board voted, liked it as it was written, create a citywide culture of community education after high school. And number 3 is prepare Grand Rapids' diverse student population to meet the demand for talent within the region. And I might state, so even if maybe that what you just, Mr. DeYoung, what you just mentioned, maybe we decide to include or not include that in the vision, but it could be also under the objective of goal number 3 in defining what we mean by diverse. So just there's options of where it would go, but we definitely agree that that needs to be somewhere in our terminology. So
I'm not married to that being visionary.
Yeah.
I think about those things in terms of how we broadly define diversity today and why we would want to be inclusive of that.
absolutely.
I wanted to make sure that the minutes reflected JC's comment, because I think those were that was well
Yep.
stated. I don't know how it is reflected in the minutes, but as long as you have knowledge of that and information as you play with this more.
Absolutely. That'll be taken into account when we present another version to this committee. So thank you. Any comments or questions on the goals as written? All right. So can we, moving on? So I want to give a broad overview of the development plan. So this is really the thing that we have to accomplish today is to, I'd like approval of this committee, from this committee, of the development plan to forward on to the full board on Monday for final approval. So I should note that we will be getting comments from the Treasury, which may include changes that we certainly should implement. So if that does happen, I will inform this committee of what those are before the Monday board meeting. But as we go through, I'm just going to overview kind of the high points of the development plan, and then we still do have the opportunity before Monday's meeting. If you read it, we're not going to get into like the verbiage of all 13 pages. But if you see something that you feel needs to be tweaked, we definitely have time to do that. It's until we have final submittal into the Treasury is when that's kind of the point of no return in some ways. So I want to overview the eligibility. So we went through, again, a process with the board and talked about different parts of eligibility, and some of these are required, and some of them we established. So the first requirement is that the student qualify for the scholarship, student reside within the boundaries of the GRPS service area as and so the GRPS service area is the Promise Zone service area as well. So you're required to graduate from a high school located within the Grand Rapids Public School District service area boundaries. Now you'll notice that the school list is not in the development plan, and that's by design so if something happens where we lost a school or we added a school, we wouldn't have to amend the development plan every time that happens. So that stands on its own. So completing the FAFSA, so there's that again each year. So this is not a requirement of the legislation. Students are required to exhaust their federal and state-based aid. And certainly we want them to do that because that complete the FAFSA because that reduces the financial liability of the Promise Zone Authority. But if a student is not eligible to submit a FAFSA, then this requirement would be waived under that requirement. So it's only the students that are eligible to submit a FAFSA would be required to do so. Enroll at Grand Rapids Community College. So we voted for the scope of the scholarship to be for students bound for GRCC. And the proration of the award is based on both the length of the residency and enrollment at eligible high school. And you see the table there. So essentially from 10th grade, if you started 10th grade or before, then you get 100% of the scholarship benefit. If you came in at 11th grade, you would get 50%. If you came in your senior year, then you would not get any benefit for the scholarship. And I should, this will come up a couple times, but this board has broad authority to grant appeals and waivers from these requirements in the development plan and in practice, if it decides to do so. All right, did I miss one here? Okay, so, that being said, within our definition, these are the high schools that are eligible currently. There are 22, and you did see this before, although there was an addition. So Southeast Career Pathways wasn't in the initial list that I submitted to you, so that was added. So there are 22 high schools, one of which is not open. It will be opening in 2020 and graduating its first class in 2025. So use of funds, covering tuition, books, supplies, and fees, and it's after the student has applied for and accepted all federal state need-based aid that they qualify for, up to 60 credit hours, which would be an associate's degree from GRCC. Be required to use a scholarship within 5 years, but there will not be, continual enrollment will not be required. However, while a student is enrolled, in order to take the greatest advantage of the need-based aid, they would be required to enroll at least 6 credit hours. However, that would not apply for the summer semester because that would be prohibitive for that semester, how it's organized. Recipients must comply with GRCC standards for satisfactory academic progress. And I know GRCC is working on a broader definition of that in practice, so the board can approve what that means. And then again, the board can consider appeals for these items as well. So as part of this, and this will, because the question has come up as people are reviewing the development plan, the development plan document that you have meets the requirements of the state. It is not by any means a detailed explanation of how the scholarship will work. So there was some questions from board members about, so what are these other entities that we're kind of referencing and what are their roles? So I will go through this at the next board meeting. But kind of this board, so the authority board is setting the vision, approving use of funds, approving contracts for different contractors that are working on various things that we'll talk about here as well, and will be the entity that will be responsible for resourcing the development plan. So leading the fundraising effort to meet that $3 million obligation that's in the development plan, and then taking the lead in developing out that student support framework. So that's kind of the role that I see that the board would be taking in this. So how does that relate to some of these other, so what's Grand Rapids Community College's role, administration, and this is pretty detailed, and I'll give a kind of broad overview. It really is, so the the data exchange between the schools and GRCC, the authority wouldn't be an intermediary in that, and there's a lot of good reasons for doing it that way. So they will hold that information and determine eligibility, determine what the funding gap and liability for each student is to the authority, and then bill the authority appropriately, as well as tracking progress as we define. So we have evaluation requirements where we have reporting requirements that we have to provide back to the Treasury, and that information will be tracked by GRCC as part of their administration role. In terms of all the kind of nitty-gritty kind of work of answering questions and communicating with eligible schools and students and parents that have questions, that will kind of live at GRCC. So communicating regularly and kind of working with the marketing partner and some of that so contact information will be held by, so who are the scholarships and how do we, scholarship recipients and how do we communicate, that will have to happen through GRCC. And then a requirement that they report to the authority so that you can report to the Treasury, which is a requirement of the Treasury. So the foundation, kind of quite simply, will hold the philanthropic funds and disperse them under the agreement, kind of with the funder and with the authority board as well. That'll be their role, as well as completing reporting requirements.
Josh,
Yep.
and this really is for Lisa as well. I think the reporting too becomes very important in an organization, and so for this position, I would like to speak with Lisa and Dr. Pink to make sure that the information is even shared through his cabinet. I would prefer Lisa Freiberger, but that's just me, that the person would report it through Lisa.
Yeah. And we've been in talks with how to arrange that. So a lot of that, I think, will be spelled out in the agreement that the board will see. So we'll have to kind of talk about what level of details in there, but we're talking about those things as well and what that agreement looks like so that the board is confident that the things that they would like to happen with that role is being accomplished.
And it is a high priority for the president of the college, and so having a vice president, as this a part of the initiative of a vice president, I think is extremely important, so it doesn't get lost somewhere in the organization down the line. This is important to the community.
Absolutely. So, you'll see GRPS in here for the accounting services. So it's common practice for promise-owned authorities to use the authorizing entity for the accounting piece. So although philanthropic funds will fund through the GRCC Foundation, when the TIF capture starts, that will go into an account that's owned by the promise-owned authority and will only be released under approval of the authority board in alignment with the development plan. So GRPS will oversee the accounting of that as part of their accounting services, and then also work closely with the audit. I see the audit piggybacking on GRPSs for economies of scale, and just kind of just makes sense, and that's what other authority boards do, just to save money, but also it was such an easy partnership, as well as just to maintain financial records that they're used to doing for following state and federal law.
And then for that, Larry O., I think that it's important that once we put this agreement together, even with the auditors, that they agree, not only do they meet with the superintendent here, but then they meet with this group to go through so that they have full access to the dollars as well.
So I have some questions about the accounting. It felt to me like there were two ways that we were keeping track of things, and it felt like doing the job twice. Between GRPS keeping some books and the community college keeping some books. And then I thought I saw in the budget something about even another external source, accounting source, but maybe that was GRPS. So help me understand the complexity or lack thereof, and what am I missing?
Thank you, Kate. I have asked Lisa Freiberger from CC and Larry Oberst to come to the mic, and so if they can both speak to that for you.
Well, again, some of the details need to be worked out yet, but my vision for this, and actually Lisa and I hadn't had a chance to talk about it directly, is the foundation, as has been indicated already this one, will take in the philanthropic funds. They're set up to take in those funds, administer those funds. We are not as a school district. All the operational aspects, financial aspects of the Promise Zone will run through us. So we obviously will get the tax increment financing from the state, and all the bills that need to be paid will be accounted for by GRPS. And the foundation, I would see, is just, again, taking the funds in and dispersing those funds essentially directly, I believe, back to the college on behalf of the students that are enrolled there under the Promise Zone authority.
Lisa.
Does that clarify it for you? I don't know if you have any other comments.
Yeah, it does, thank you. And I understand that the devil is in the details as you guys work out the contract, so
Yeah.
I'll be here to see it.
Yeah.
And Kate, one of the things that I'm really excited about is Lisa served in Larry Oberst's role in the district, for a number of years. And so having the two together, GRPS and CC, with Lisa there, she knows the ins and outs, and led us very successfully through financial times in the district.
Thank you. So we actually went through the role of the marketing firm, just to reiterate that will be a contract with the authority board, and the marketing is critical in this part. So it's like, so why do we need marketing? So it really is to notify the student and the parent and the school and the counselor that, hey, this is there when you graduate. So make sure, and what are those messages? So make sure if your GPA is not here, if you don't have your FAFSA done, if you're not in attendance, all those messages are important to ensure that the student is prepared mentally as well as academically at graduation to take full advantage of that scholarship. So that's a really critical piece of this, and that's going to be a critical kind of selection, but also a process to go through to develop that out. We're doing it preliminarily because we have to be ready for it now, but the longer process for how does it talked about, in future years. And so there you'll see a budget. We'll go through the financials here in a minute of dedicating some funds for that, but there's also opportunity to leverage the funds that are part of GRCC's marketing budget in the schools and those networks and the cities and all those things. Leverage is really going to be a critical point of this as well. So
I also think it's important for the community to understand.
Yeah.
We all have clear expectations of these children.
Absolutely.
Right? And that is coming to school, not missing, and doing what they need to do.
Yep.
And so as part of the marketing, I think we all need to come together. What are some of those non-negotiables? Because we're trying to change a culture in this community.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We want every parent and every student to be ready and to know, right? There's a line in the sand.
Mm-hmm. So legal counsel, let me move to that again, but so I do see some pretty critical roles with that when that counsel is selected is there are some policies that need to be developed for this authority board, and that's the expertise of the legal counsel. I think there would be some copyright and trademarking to be done around this, as well as advising on the Open Meetings Act, FOIA, FERPA. I do foresee that Sharon will still be critical in that, but there's that separation at that point of we need our own counsel, and then other issues as they arise. So, all right. So, any questions up to this point? I'm going to get into the projections for the scholarship and financial projections for the scholarship itself. So we worked with GRCC. So I'll take a step back. So at the last board meeting, we presented scenarios, and those scenarios were based on the existing matriculation of students. And so that, as were the cost estimates. So the work that we had to do after that board meeting fairly quickly is to go back and say, okay, so what increases above and beyond existing matriculation can we expect to experience by offering a scholarship to all the eligible students that graduate and live in the city? So this is what we worked at GRCC to develop. So on the left column, you'll see this is the graduation year of the student. The number of eligible graduates. So these are our graduation projections that we saw last time that Plant Moran helped us develop, and then the percent of those graduates who we can expect would enroll in GRCC. So the existing matriculation is 16% of these students from these schools are going to GRCC. We projected an initial bump. I can say these are very, so we're being conservative by probably over projecting on the number of students. I can probably speak for GRCC. They would be ecstatic if it went up 3 percentage points for the class of 2020 for this next school year. And then you see the kind of increase from there. And then it really is just carrying over. And so you'll see our assumptions, persistence rate. Again, we projected a higher persistence rate. So how many students will remain enrolled from year 1, year 2, year 2 to year 3 of 65%. I believe it's currently 58%. Something like that. And then 40% of students enrolling part-time, that actually, GRCC also has a higher number part-time students, but what we do know from other Promise scholarships is that the credits attempted go up, actually more so than the actual number of students that choose the eligible institution. The number of credits attempted go up. So we assumed a higher percentage would be full-time as part of these projections. And it's really just carrying that forward. And you see at the bottom here for each, so these are the GRCC academic years. And so you see at the bottom, we have the total, and then you see we have it broken out of full-time and part-time for each year. So this is the impact as far as number of students served through the years, through the end of the 2029-2030 academic year. So any questions about this before we move to the next part? Because this informs the costs, obviously, that we'll see here as a next step. However, I do want to take a moment. So it was asked of me to, what is the decision that was made to start now to set the base, what impact does that have? I had questions about tax increment financing. So I'm going to give this to you, and I apologize if you already know this and this is a review, but I'm going to give this again to the board. Some of the board members had questions about what the tax increment financing, how it works. So this is what we put together. So you see, so this is based on the SET. It was the state education tax capture for the GRPS district. So once the base is set, so currently if we started a scholarship in 2020, we would use the 2019 base. So that denotes this dark area. And from that going forward, the state would continue to capture that base fully, would go into the state SET fund. The incremental growth above and beyond that, which is the green part, the Promise Zone Authority Board captures half of the growth of the incremental growth. So that's the green part. So this is how it would look. Now it's not going to be a pretty straight line like that, but how it looked, if we did that. So what happens if we wait a year? What happens at that point? So the blue part, so we go to 2020 and that base is higher. And so the growth that wouldn't be realized is this blue area. And so using the state projections, that's just a little, about $1.25 million, half of which this authority would capture. So it's just over $600,000 on an annual basis that you would capture starting the base a year earlier, as opposed to waiting another year to start it. So that's kind of just a really quick overview of tax increment financing and kind of why establishing the base so early is an important factor in how much financial resources you have moving forward.
Josh, will you also cover this at the
I
board
will.
meeting
Yeah.
next week, just so everyone can have an opportunity to ask questions?
Absolutely. Yeah, some of the people that were asking the questions
Right.
aren't not in this room right now.
That's great.
So, but I just wanted you to see the first
great.
run through so that it made sense to you as well. All right, so,
Josh, real quick, Lisa and I are gonna have to leave in a minute, so if there's anything else you need from me. or
Okay.
Lisa.
I think we're good. The rest is going to be just financial information, so I think we're good for now. Other than we will be sending out a communication to the board, the full board, about the press conference, because we're going to ask them to stay and be a part of that as well.
That was the only part I wanted to add, is that we're working, we've got the city, GRCC, and my team working on this press conference, and it's really that media availability right after your meeting while everyone's still gathered. It'll be short and sweet, probably 10 to 15 minutes. We'll have talking points. There will be the mayor, Teresa, the chair. We'll also have Dr. Pink and one or two students that are going to be graduating and going to GRCC next year.
John, for the students, can you make sure that you extend the invitation beyond GRPS? Just, again, because we're trying to do the mindset of the community, so they know it's all about.
Yeah, in fact, I was gonna, Tom, and JC, I was gonna see if I could connect with maybe one of your, if they have a way to identify a student that's already planning to go to CC, that would be ideal.
That's right.
But it doesn't have to be a senior, but it would be great to have some other student voice.
Yeah, great, good, thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to go through the rest of this kind of quickly. So this was provided by the Treasury. There are projections for the SET, and so these financial projections are based on that model that was provided by the Treasury. It is pretty aggressive, although I think the next couple years we will see quite a bit of growth. It gets less clear moving forward. But when we look at to account for that, we were pretty aggressive on the student projections to kind of account for that, so that we make sure that we have enough financial resources to meet the need. And so kind of to explain this, so we got the SET base here, and then we have the growth in SET above the base year. So this number is this number minus the base year. And then when you go down here, so every year it's all subtracted by the base year, and that's the incremental growth. And then this is half of that growth. And you notice it kind of goes backwards. So this is half of the 2022 gets released in 2023. So you're always kind of going back a year to get that calculation. So that's the revenue that we were.
I have a quick question.
Absolutely.
Does, when we raise private money, have any effect on when we get to capture the public money?
Good question.
Like, if we raise it sooner, do we get to capture the public money?
That's a great.
No. So we're required, the authority board is required to cover the scholarship obligation for the first 2 years after the development plan is created. So we have to cover the obligation for those first 2 years at least. So you'll see in the projections, there's some beyond the first 2 years that we'd have to cover. But that once we do that, and Treasury just, okay, you delivered on your development plan for 2 years. Now we're going to release the tax capture that is actually happening in the first and second year. It's just you don't get that injection until the third year. So we have to, the board has to cover the first 2 years, and that's what the philanthropic portion is for, to get that. So you don't get it like a year earlier if you raise more money. You have to cover the obligation for those 2 years.
State holds in its coffers.
Yep.
And does not allow us to distribute it until 2022.
That would be correct.
Is that correct?
Yep.
And is that based on a September 1 sort of fiscal year, or is it considered, is it a calendar year, fiscal year?
So the fiscal year of this
It's aligned to this fiscal year.
is the July to
Right.
June. So you'll get it, and I don't know when you'll actually get the money in the bank, but you'll have it for your
Effective.
2022-23
That makes sense.
fiscal year. Yep. All right. Some of the assumptions behind, and I'm going to go through this really quickly. You'll see the tuition fees, books, supplies. You know, we again, we're pretty aggressive on making sure that we have enough funds there for each student. Annual tuition growth, 3%. I don't think it's going to grow that much year over year, but that's what we provided. And then we have assumed credits attempted for full-time and part-time that the calculations are based upon. Pell and TIP percentage, number who qualify for that, is based on existing student population that's going to GRCC. We have that information, as well as the average Pell and TIP award is based on the existing student population, which GRCC has that data. So that informs the next slide, which even gets more convoluted, but that really is applying so I got it broken down by full-time and part-time student, and it's applying the student projections that we saw by the tuition fees, books per student, to get a subtotal for each of these. And then this column here is the total of these two numbers, kind of carrying that forward. So this is the total kind of scholarship cost before need-based aid. And then that's this column is subtracting the need-based aid that we can assume for the student population to get the final scholarship cost for each year. So that is the projected obligation each year for the cost side. Any questions about that? I don't,
No, but I just have a comment. I think it's important that whoever we hire to do this work, I think it's important for them to really scope out other scholarships,
Yep.
because a lot of these children will qualify for other academic scholarships, sports,
Yep.
Just memberships that their parents may have. And so that may even reduce that even more.
Well, it wouldn't come first, though.
No, but just to-
So it would provide more financial. So there's things that we can't cover, like travel.
Absolutely.
Like those are kind of thing we can't cover. Living expenses, but some scholarships may. So we had that conversation with GRCC, and but we need with Community Foundation and others. There's these scholarships. There's a lot of scholarships out there.
That's right.
And as part of this process, how do we ensure that we're besting those students? That this doesn't mean that your full financial obligation is covered here, so let's keep
That's right. We want to
going.
continue.
Yeah, that's an important part of the messaging. So in addition to that, so kind of getting to we have one more slide after this, so here's the assumptions for all those different kind of roles that we identified earlier. So marketing, GRCC admin, we got a preliminary number. This will be, all these will be solidified in a contract. There's this audit. So that might be what Kate was referring to, this other accounting entity. But that really is there's going to be a requirement for a third-party audit, and that's just covering that. And GRPS will oversee that as part of their accounting, which is the next column they provided. Legal is a projection by me using other firms that we work with of similar size. Again, we'll have that. I have some miscellaneous stuff, and then the program development evaluation. It has Canari's fee in there, as well as there was talk of, do we hire a evaluation firm? This will change a little bit, I think, though, if we decide to go with a bigger scope around the student framework, support framework. But this is really just a projection of what, to get us something in there for those items. So those are the admin costs. So you put all that together is how we got to the overall. So you'll see the annual scholarships is carried forward, the admin costs is carried forward. The difference is kind of put into the college readiness. So we can't be amassing surpluses over here. So that's really the difference is what you'd spend on the other eligible costs, which really is the college readiness efforts. So, and then you have the capture, there's a revenue side to get what the variance is. So,
Let me ask a question about what I think I heard you just say.
yep.
Was that we can't have, you mean we can't spend more than we have, obviously. But, this is essentially an endowment. And so it seems to me, if in the first several years, we find that we, overplan, that maybe there weren't as many students
Yep.
that either qualified or wanted to go, and, say in year 5, we have a lot more money than we expected,
Yep.
and we can have that, right?
You can.
Maybe we can
Yep.
expand it.
You can, and that's where the board has a discretion within the legislation to spend those funds. And this is really just setting that column of what we can expect would be there for the board to actually make a determination on what is spent upon. So that's also, but if that framework is developed out, you kind of have your priorities set ahead of time, where you essentially take a look at that. Okay, we have additional funds here. Where do we invest it? And so that's some of the work that the board needs to do still to identify what those priorities are. Yep. So on the variance side, you see the remaining amount. Now you have kind of a weird kind of year where, okay, we have some money and then we have a gap again. That's really because at a certain point, GRC, whoever's doing the admin will have to ramp up. So there'll be kind of an additional cost because there's an addition of a 0.5 FTE in there that will have to be added to accommodate the number of students that we're talking about. So that's the reason for that. So rounding up, we're saying as a target for fundraising, the $3 million to meet the financial obligation to drive the fundraising, which we'll do through kind of a major gift effort. So we're not proposing like a formal campaign process to do this. Really identifying some individuals that have capacity 50,000, 100,000 above, and develop very specific cultivation strategies for each of those, which includes, who's the best to make the contact, who should be at the meetings when we talk about the Promise Zone, who should make the ask, those kind of things will be a part of that strategy that Canary will help walk this committee through and the board through as well.
Do we foresee at any point, I have just a couple of quick operational questions. Do we foresee at any point that as this expands, a point where Grand Oberst Community College is no longer the most appropriate keeper of or distributor of these funds? I'm thinking as it expands beyond GRCC at some point. That's just maybe a yes/no answer.
I think so. One of the things we talked about at one of our meetings, at some point, we would expand not only from community college, but to possibly
At
other
some point, yeah.
institutions. And so we would have to make that decision at that point.
Okay.
Because we wouldn't want CC making the check out to a Western or to.
Right.
I mean, so at some point it will.
Yeah.
It becomes relevant. The other question I have is, do we as a board have to approve I heard Kate ask the question on, it's an endowment, which I totally understand. Do we have to then approve at some point some kind of a spending policy?
So there will be, so that's the legal counsel. There should be business operational policies. But so this committee in June, by June at the latest, should be approving an annual budget for the authority board for the next fiscal year. Actually, that's required by when you're actually distributing funds. It'd be a little strange at first because there will be funds that will be, you're not gonna have any money for the first, so it'll be in the foundation, and it'll be a little, like we'll have to work through that, but.
I understand.
Yeah.
I always think of foundations and endowments as with a 5% spending policy.
So I should
won't be
clarify, this is not an endowment.
Okay.
These are pass-through funds, so.
Okay.
That
makes sense.
Unless a donor gives to the GRCC Foundation and endows something in a part of this, it's all going to be pass-through funds.
It's money in, money out.
Yep.
I understand.
Yep.
Thank you.
So that is the end of my development plan presentation. I'll answer any questions, and then I would ask that the committee consider a motion to approve the development plan for submission to the full board.
Thank you for being so thorough, Josh.
Just,
We had a lot of discussion about pieces within the development plan, and so I'm not sure whether we should just wholesale approve it unless some of those things have been captured.
So let's talk about that now. So she has some things to discuss with regard to the development plan that we should consider.
I haven't kept track of it, and maybe the discussion that we've had hasn't changed anything. But
Yeah.
the plan,
The only thing that we noted that we'd probably change is remove that one sentence in the vision statement that we want to rework. And so I think we'll take that out of the development plan for now. And then, again, mission, vision, goals are not set by approval of the development plan. That can be changed by the board at any point, and we will consider future drafts. I haven't heard any other changes that would affect the development plan.
then I'm sure I would move approval recommendation to the full board of the development plan.
Did you have something?
I do, and we haven't gone over that part of it yet.
Okay.
And that is on page 3 of the board memorandum.
So page 3.
Number 5, eligible institutions.
Yep.
Would it make sense to put Grand Rapids Community College or as otherwise amended by the authority board?
So that's inherent. When we do name another eligible entity, we have to amend and resubmit a new development plan to the Treasury. So that is inherent in this. We can't add another eligible entity until we amend this plan and submit it to Treasury for approval again. Yeah.
I have just one question before I vote on that, and that is the question on residency. Is there any Grand Rapids public school attendance area school that captures anything of Grand Rapids Township? There's nothing within the township or some of those weird lines that kind of go around the city. I think of, for example, like Forest Hills kids
Potter's Hill.
live in Kentwood as a city. Is there anything weird like that within the GRPS attendance area?
We have tried to clean all of that up over the last 10 years. I mean, we did have some kind of quirky things out there, but
So but the zone is the GRPS zone, a service area, not the city of Grand Rapids service area.
Okay,
So
thank
if
you.
there are some of those quirky things, which maybe that could change, those would be captured by the Promise Zone Authority development plan, because it's not just, it could be more than just the city of Grand Rapids if the GRPS boundaries extend beyond.
Okay. And there's nothing out there outside of strange like that is, right? I just was trying not to miss something.
Yep.
You know, it's interesting because our high school counseling staff at Grand Rapids Christian last night had a meeting with all of our parents of juniors. They do that for a variety of grades every year, multiple times. There's information that's out there about this because some parents are asking questions about it.
Sure.
So for us to all have real good clarity on questions like, well, what if I live in Kentwood, but I go to a city's high school? And I was at the meeting because I wanted to hear how our counselors were doing. And the answer to the question is there's been nothing approved formally by the board. Yes, there's a Promise Zone Authority board that's been, authorized, whatever. I just want to make sure that we all understand those questions really, the answers to those questions really well.
Yep. And we're trying to capture those now and what we need to address. But as we go forward, if you see something that's like, we're not addressing this in a clear way, we need to change it. We need to know that as soon as possible so that we can adjust, because we're moving quickly on these, right? And certainly as we hear, for GRCC or other questions that we're like, we really do have to address that in a different way, we will make that change and notify this committee, of that and the board.
The importance of the Q&A kind of thing that we'll be
Yep.
developing and making on the website and things of that nature, it's really important to vet those through people who will have good insight as to possible or likely questions, either that they've received or that they would anticipate.
Absolutely.
I think your point is well taken, Tom, and that is with the marketing, it needs to be really clear if you reside within,
Right.
right? Just
Exactly right.
remove the questions, right? And so people don't have to wonder if I live in Kentwood but attend no. I mean, we need to be real clear.
So that's true for schools
great.
of choice kids too then, correct? I mean, because that's
It's where you
happening all
live.
over the place now.
Yep.
Okay.
So taking your comment into consideration, I would also ask that we hold, but Josh, if we can make the change that JC had, and then let's get that out to the full board, so they at least have a chance to read it before our next meeting. Kate, we would ask if it is okay that we hold the vote, but we at least get the information out so that everyone has an opportunity to read it, if that's
Absolutely.
okay.
And can I just make an observation? Kudos to GRPS, because when I look at the cost to administer the accounting, acknowledging that an audit does cost $10,000, but $3,000 for the accounting versus $10,000 for the audit. Kudos to Grand Rapids Public Schools.
They left.
Appreciation, because this is a huge undertaking for GRPS.
And our auditors are Plant Moran, and so pretty reputable. And CC is probably using the same. Good deal. Great, Josh. Great.
So is the motion that's been made, has that now been tabled?
We have to vote on the
We
motion
would like to vote on the motion.
as amended with your comment to approve the
Been
development.
seconded yet, or no?
No.
I second that as amended.
So take the roll.
Please.
All right, Mr. DeYoung,
Approve?
Mr. Huizenga,
Approved.
Ms. Pugh Walters, and Chairperson Weatherall Neal.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. I would like to just say thank you to all of you for taking your time to work through this. This is extremely important to the children and the citizens of this community. And so just appreciate you guys taking the time to kind of push through this with us. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you all.